Hello and welcome to Concert Pipeline. I'm Steve Jones. Today on the program, we have an artist named Vanderwolf, who has a new album out called The Great Bewilderment. Recommend checking that out. It's a good listen. We get to talk about that album and so much more. I had a really great chat with Vanderwolf, so we'll get into that in just a few minutes. Before we do, catch everybody up on what's going on in my world. This intro is being taped on Easter, so got some Easter type stuff to share. Yesterday in town, we had at the community pool there was an Easter egg hunt of sorts where kids could go in the pool and gather a bunch of Easter eggs. They were most all empty, so it was just a chance for them to get to swim and gather empty Easter eggs. But my kid's mom didn't know whether they'd be filled or not. I saw a picture of them floating on the water, so I knew they're going to be pretty light and above water and not below. But we went with my kid's mom and their stepdad and their kid and my daughter. Everybody else had to stay outside of the pool. It was just me and my son, which went in the water because we were participating. Their kid, who was 5 years old, doesn't know how to swim, and so couldn't really participate in the activities. And my daughter was too old by a year to participate in the activities, so she just encouraged my son and pointed to him where the eggs were, and that sort of thing. So nothing really to be. There were no prizes won by him or anything. Again, nothing really inside the eggs for the most part. So just had fun, chasing after them and swimming, and we swam for an hour, and you got a picture with the Easter Bunny. So it was good. It was fun, and the pool was heated, which was great. It rained a little bit slightly before the Easter egg hunt, so I'm glad the rain cleared and the sun came out just in time for the hunt because it was a little bit chilly to be going in the pool at this time of year. So there's that. And then today being Easter, I went over to my kids' mom's and stepdad's house to do the Easter egg hunt with the kids and have a breakfast. Their stepdad Will made eggs Benedict, which was tasty. That was nice. I don't usually cook my eggs that way, so it was a tasty treat. And then my mom came a little bit later to pick up my daughter and take her on a little road trip to San Francisco for a couple of days. Not much of a road trip because it's like an hour away, but just a little trip, a little getaway where they're not going too far, but going to do some fun things together and that sort of thing. So she came, and so I stuck around until she got there to say hello, happy Easter, that sort of thing. And she gave me a plant. I forget what kind of plant, but it's one of those like yellow, had a single yellow dandelion poking out of it, and she's like, plant it and water it, and it'll stay alive, and you can help it grow and all of that. It was pretty cheap plant, nothing special. And I told her, I was like, I'm gonna kill it. It's gonna die. It just is. Things don't last long with me, but I'll take it, sure. I'm going to kill it, and it's going to die. And then so she went with my daughter her separate way, and then I left just a moment later to head home myself with the plant in the pot on the floor of my car. She had also given me a Gatorade, a little small individual Gatorade that she had in the back of her car as a drink, and I had put that on the passenger seat. I got 3 blocks from my kid's mom's house down to the traffic light. The first traffic light, the Gatorade rolls off the seat of the car and snaps the one dandelion out of the plant. And I just cracked up. It was hilarious. I didn't make it more than 3 blocks before that plant was dead. I had to call my kid's mom up and just let her know. I was like, so I told her that this was going to die. And it died. It didn't even make it home. I'm just going to throw the whole thing away. It's not going to live. It's gone. She's like, good idea. She'd gotten a plant from my mom too, and a slightly better plant, but yeah, she doesn't have high hopes for hers living either. Neither of us have green thumbs, so having something stay alive is a miracle if it does happen. So that's my interesting Easter Story. I was pretty happy with it. It was comics. I could not tell my mom that. She would blame me and get angry at me for something that I had no control of or no intention of, even though I just knew it was going to die. I just didn't know how quick it was going to happen. So that's my story. All right. So let's go ahead and let's bring Vanderwolf in on the program. Here's my interview with Vanderwolf. Yeah. How's your day treating you so
Garrett,
far?
I'm on my way to the Big Ears Festival, so it's a little chaotic. Today is a little bit intense.
Yeah. What,
Um,
what, what does
Hoping
that look like for
to
you?
get through it. I'm going, what's that?
Oh, I was
I'm
just
going
saying, what
to
does that look
Griff
like for you?
Reed. The Big Ears Festival looks like 3 days of some of the best music I'll ever get to listen to in 3 days. I'm kicking it off tonight with seeing Griff Rees perform at the Zebulon. Griff is an old friend and a great talent, and looking forward to seeing him. It's been a long time. And then getting on a 7 a.m. flight to Knoxville for 3 days of nonstop music.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. So, anybody you're looking forward to seeing in those 3 days?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a huge collection of a lot of the musicians who used to perform at the Knitting Factory. So, I mean, it's everyone from Fred Frith to Elliott Sharp, Wayne Horvitz, Laurie Anderson. Um, it's a whole bunch of the Mark Rebo, John Medeski. And then, of course, there's some bigger shows. I'm looking forward to seeing Will Oldham, Bonnie Prince Billy, Brad Meldow, Henry Threadgill. Um, it's pretty rich, and the great stuff is seeing stuff you don't know about, and stuff you haven't seen before. I'll be checking out a model I've never seen before. Um, Quite a few others, Nick Barch and people like that. Yeah.
That's the fun of a festival. You have bands that you go there for, bands that you're excited about that you're like, okay, got to see them. But then also bands that you're exposed to that you're like, okay, never seen this band live before, or maybe haven't even heard of them, and you're like, this band blew me away, and now I'm a fan. That's kind of the cool thing about a festival like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, you think you're going there for one thing, usually like the stuff you kind of know about, but some of the stuff that ends up exciting you the most is the discovery stuff, and that's a very discovery based festival. It's very much about seeing things you haven't seen before. In fact, it's kind of heartbreaking sometimes. You're like, you want to go see Mark Rebo or something. I mean, he's always fantastic, but you've seen him 100 times, and there's someone you've never seen playing somewhere else. And I think a lot of people who go to that festival have a sense of responsibility about discovering new things.
Yeah, yeah. I've had the same sort of moments where it's like there's three bands you want to see kind of all playing at the same time on different sides, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get a couple songs from this band, run across to the stage over here, and then over there, and kind of really have to plan it out so
Yeah,
you squeeze it in.
there are some very brutal conflicts on Friday and Saturday night that are going to be really tricky to work out.
Yeah, yeah. It, and you mentioned some of the artists that you worked with at the Knitting Factory. Tell me about the experience with the Knitting Factory. How did that come about? What was your involvement there? Kind of tell me how it built up.
The Knitting Factory had a great history of hiring musicians to program the venue, starting with Wayne Horvitz, who I believe was the first. And when I got the job, the programmer was Kid Millions, who you might know from the band Oneida. And
Mm,
I took over from him, being a musician on the scene and maybe a little bit more of a curator than a musician. And it was a boot camp. It was a very intense, exciting, fun atmosphere. There were three, or sometimes there were four rooms to program, and it was 365 days a year, 7 days a week.
wow.
The good thing about that is you could say yes to a lot of musicians who needed a gig, Um, the the difficulty was doing it all and doing it well and finding the time to, provide the level of service that the musicians, deserved. And it was a very political atmosphere as well, in terms of the venue had a history of, that venue was home for a lot of musicians for a long time. And as the music industry changed, um, a lot of those musicians felt put out. Um, and that was just kind of the changing definition of the venue. Of course, what seemed to be a bad change then is nothing compared to how terrible things are right now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I mean, if things started to feel bad to musicians the beginning of the 2000s, because it was harder to get booked into the Knitting Factory, I think what musicians face right now is just devastating.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a platform for everybody now, and that means everybody wants a stage too, right? So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of noise and not a lot of ability for musicians to kind of rise above. There's not a lot of investment. I mean, the music industry is so depleted that you don't see a lot of investment going into young musicians and new ideas for music and new kind of risk-taking artists.
yeah. So what were some of the highlights from the Knitting Factory period where you were able to help these artists kind of get this platform, get this stage? Kind of what did that look like?
Well, in terms of helping artists get to a new level, I did some of the earliest gigs for Anoni, Anthony and the Johnsons at the time. I can remember one night where I did a sort of kind of a cabaret type night with Genesis Peorage and Anoni's group, Anthony and the Johnsons, and a great young artist named Marianne Nowotny. And I remember that being quite an influence and a hit. I did the early shows of all the Elephant Six bands. That was a really big deal for me. Olivia Tremor Control and Elf Power, and of course Neutral Milk Hotel. Um, there were things like Carolina, an obscure, one of the weirdest bands you could ever hope to see. They're worth researching. They're a fantastic weird band, but just a wonderful thing. There were so many things from that period that didn't quite bust out. I did the early shows of Elliott Smith, June of 44. Labels like Touch and Go were frequently at the Knitting Factory with their artists. Thrill jockey artists were frequently in there. Members of Tortoise with their various different projects. But the stuff that becomes perhaps more memorable is some of the bigger stuff. The John Zorn Masada acoustic stuff was always amazing. The Zorn Medeski quartet with Kenny Wollesen and Mark Rebo was always amazing. And then, I did things like 6 nights of David Byrne. I brought in a
Wow.
lot of, yeah, I did. No one could believe that he had agreed to that. He
Yeah.
might not even believe it at this point. Did, early shows of Rufus Wainwright. I was really kind of, I did Gong on their first American tour reunion. That was a big one for me because I was such a fan. I did Suicide's first show back.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah, before they really reunited. This would have been in like 1999. And that was just wonderful. They hadn't played again, up to that point. That kind of got them all excited about maybe doing a proper reunion. And of
Yeah.
course, they went ahead and did that, and they were brilliant every time.
Yeah. That's really cool. And so did that lead the way to the Meltdown Festival for you?
Yeah, that led the way to the Meltdown. It was about 3 years in. We were looking to open in London or Berlin. there was lots of talk that had happened, and I definitely already had one foot out the door because I did not want to live in the United States anymore. And I'm still not sure I do, but we'll see what happens in November. And I just basically was introduced to the person who had the job. I was trying to help them out with a project they wanted to do with Bell and Sebastian in New York. And one day I got a message from them saying that they were leaving their post producing the Meltdown. And I immediately wrote back and said, what are the chances they would hire a Yank for that job? And he said, slim to none, but I'll get you an interview. And he did. And, the rest, as they say, was history. It was about 10 years at the South Bank producing Meltdown, and not just Meltdown, but I put together an electronic music festival there about music technology and visual arts. And then I did a psychedelic festival there for a few years, and did just various big show. It was like putting my album collection on stage on a monthly basis.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where you synced up with Bowie, right?
Yes.
2002.
Yeah.
And so tell me about that experience. I mean, I always love hearing Bowie stories. I'm such a big fan. I want to hear your experience.
I guess the one, putting together Meltdown is really difficult. So, it's not as you always think you're going to just be able to get whatever you want. And now you're working for one of your favorite artists, hopefully. It wasn't always one of my favorite artists, but you always want to do well for them. And the things you want to get are sometimes not available to you. And, artists are busy and they want to perform when they want to perform. And just because you've got, David Bowie as your calling card doesn't necessarily mean that shit's going to go your way. You also have to remember that in 2002, Bowie was not exactly, he was not the legend he is today. He was a legend, but, this is on the back of a lot of bad music that he had released for me, it stops at Scary Monsters personally. And I don't really think there was a real sincere connection he made to other artists after that. So I think, in some ways the invitation was viewed somewhat cynically by some artists. And I think there just wasn't, I had my previous Meltdown was with Robert Wyatt, and the press were massively on board with that. And when we announced Bowie, it was a little muted in comparison. So, that's really interesting in the context of the way we celebrate the legend of David Bowie now.
Yeah.
All deserved, of course, but it's important that people realize. So when I worked with him, his profile was a little lower. He had just left Virgin because they refused to put out the album Toy, and he was going to start his own record label, which was tremendously exciting for us. We were going to launch it on Meltdown, and over the course of Meltdown, Sony came around and offered him a huge deal. And he kind of disappeared from the process. And we could not get him to sign the contract.
No.
It was just, they just have a lot of, they have a lot going on. And for whatever reason, they're gonna hold out their options as long as they can. And so he had a corporate structure around him. And I have to say that until February 14th, 2002, when I met him face to face, it was a really difficult corporate kind of engagement with him.
Yeah.
And I had met him once before and had a nice chat with him, but it wasn't until we sat down around the table with his people and they saw him take control of the situation, that we got the contract signed and we were able to move forward.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I like to say that David Bowie saved my life twice. Once he saved it by just being David Bowie and releasing those albums. And the other time he saved it by coming into that meeting and vibing it and taking, you know, really like blowing back the cobwebs of corporate fear, you know, that kind of thing where everyone's afraid to make a decision around the artist or take the lead until he does. So yeah, that was kind of my experience with him. And then he, you know, it ended up being a great festival. He really did drop out of the picture at one point, but I will take it as a great, what will I take it as? A great appreciation, maybe, you know, because at a certain point, you know, he wasn't really available to say we should do this or we should do that. And I had to make some guesses. And I had to fill up some spaces for some free shows that we used to do and some support slots, openers. Mm-hmm. And one of them was Yeah, Yeah, Yes, which was fantastic, of course, very early in their career, 2002, or at least early in their UK career. And the other one was Polyphonic Spree, who I adore. And I was able to put on as a free show in a space and where everyone sort of gathers before the main concert. And the next night I had them on as support for Divine Comedy. And a 5-star review came out on the free show in The Guardian. And everyone bought tickets to see them the next night. And they were, of course, incredible. And then about a year later, I guess, you know, David had heard about him at that point, and he took them on tour with him. And they're, you know, they're 26 people.
Yeah,
so for him to take 26 people on tour, he certainly doesn't have to do that. I kind of felt that was a little bit of a, I took that as a little bit of a nod to me.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not a small touring act, you know. I saw them around that same time in 2002, 2003, and interviewed them back then even. And well, 5 of them, not all 26 or anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, they're really good acts. They don't come in a small package, so yeah.
No, they're great. They're still great.
Yeah. And you paid tribute to Bowie just a couple of years ago, doing the 50th of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. Like, I mean, tell me about that experience.
Oh, are you referring to the performance at Union Chapel?
Yeah, I think so.
In London. Yeah, that was, you know, that was really thrown together very quickly, right on the back of David Bowie's departure.
Yeah.
And so, like, you know, the emotions were raw, and it was a lot of local artists. You know, no really huge names, but a great group of people and real talented people who all came up and did their best. And it was in the beautiful Union Chapel in London. And I think it was like maybe even less than a week later.
Wow.
That it was thrown together. And yeah, I went up and did a performance of the Bewley Brothers, which has more lyrics than I probably should have agreed to do. But it was kind of the one that I seized upon. And I also, you know, I knew there'd be a lot of stuff that people would perform from Ziggy Stardust and Aladdin Sane and whatever. And I really wanted to reach, you know, pretty deep into the early catalog. And that song is so mystical and the lyrics are so fantastic. I gathered my guitarist at the time, Chris Cordoba, and Romeo from the Magic Numbers, and the three of us went up there and did the Bewley Brothers, and it yeah, really, when you pick a song like that and on the back of such a momentous moment for all of us, it really resonated. You can, it definitely had a rarefied atmosphere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, my favorite concert of all time was a Bowie celebration back in 2016 after he passed, and it was in San Francisco. Like 70 musicians. Gary Oldman led it, and
Oh wow.
yeah, and I got to interview him at the show and a bunch of other
Okay. Who
people
else
too.
performed?
It was
Who else performed on that one?
Oh man, I mean, there was a symphony from Los Angeles. There's like a Los Angeles group of artists, and then an Oakland
Okay.
group. Let's Joe Sumner from Sting's son. Yeah, he performed.
Yeah.
Some people from Bowie's band. Holly, I forget her last name.
Okay.
Blanking, but
Okay.
Jerry from Talking Heads.
Oh
And
yes,
I
yes, yes. I do remember this event. Yeah, I do remember.
yeah.
I remember this one. Was Mike Garson on that?
I
Do you
want to
remember
say
it?
yes. I want
Yeah,
to
I
say
think
yes.
so.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. There was a lot. And I mean, it was like 3.5 hours of epicness, and then being there for sound check, it was like another 2 hours. And it was just an evening of Bowie magic. And it
Yeah.
was the most incredible thing that you can't really reproduce.
Yeah, it can't be repeated because those events were happening so close to the actual death of David Bowie, it kind of the emotional content was so powerful, and I didn't organize that one. I was just asked to do it, and um everyone's everyone was mourning. Everyone there
Yeah.
was definitely mourning and also felt very good about being together.
Yeah. And on the heels of, I mean, Black Star, which didn't get I don't think it got the respect it deserves. Like, I mean, that album and
No,
him going out on
that
top
album
there.
is, I agree with you. I mean, I do think like it'll just be it'll be another 10 years before everyone acknowledges what a masterpiece that is. Most musicians acknowledge what a masterpiece it is. But he really went for it on that one. I mean, the very fact that he still had it to just pursue that record the way he did. I mean,
Yeah.
one wonders if he had had that urgency in the previous
True.
15 years. But that's not where his head was at. He had moved on to other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And so, 12 Little Killers you put out in 2021.
Yep.
And that's each track on the album is its own killer, I presume. But it's what you said about it is meant to be heard in its entirety, and that's not kind of how people listen to music really anymore. But tell
Yeah.
me about kind of putting that together and kind of feeling this as an entire entity, that you created. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah. You're referring to 12 Little Killers, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Is
yeah,
that what
yeah.
you said? Yeah. The 12 Little Killers is kind of a funny one because a lot of that material we thought was going to be the next Last Man Standing record, which was my
Mhm.
London band. And I just, for a long time, I could not put the sequence together to make it into the story I thought it needed to be. Um, it, I, I come from the period that you bought an album and you brought it home and you listened to side A and you got up and you flipped it and you listened to side B. And that kind of experience, that's a very theatrical, immersive experience. Um, we use the word immersive experience. Well, we did at least, pre-COVID, a lot to describe something. But the album was an immersive experience. Especially if you were a kid listening to music in headphones because you didn't want your parents to listen to your music or come into the room or whatever. So, this was a really immersive experience. And I still think of album releases as immersive. And with 12 Little Killers, I didn't have a sequence I was happy with. And basically, about, I kept thinking I need to record more. And let's face it, you're a musician's natural habitat in most cases. If it's not the stage, it's the studio. And I really just decided I'll keep going back and record and record and record until I, had a huge amount of songs. And I still have that backlog of songs. And finally, in desperation, I decided I was like blocked, just like you have writer's block. And I gave it to my lovely keyboard player, Sam Sallin, and said, look, he was kind of like, when are you going to release this stuff? Enough already. You have to stop recording. He wasn't the only one saying it to me. I was getting a lot of frustration from my musicians. And I said, look, you want to come up with, you think you can come up with an album? If you can come up with an album, I will say yes to that. And he challenged me by saying, I'll come up with an album, but you can't change it. And I said, I get one veto. I get one veto. You got to give me one veto. And he said, okay. He went away. He came back after listening for a few weeks and presented me with a track sequence I hadn't thought about. He omitted some songs I was surprised about. It hurt me. He included songs that I was surprised about. I liked it, but you always, feel bad when certain songs get omitted from a lineup. But ultimately, he created an album. I used my one veto on a sneaky little track he tried to get in there that I didn't think belonged. And that was the album. It's suddenly like I couldn't see it, going from that. I never saw that as an opening track, I Am Not a Mountain. I thought that was kind of a master stroke on his part. It opened up the whole idea of the record, and suddenly I could see how this, and that record does. It starts from a whisper and just kind of goes like this. And it's, it does kind of tell a story. I also think, I'm a big proponent of, even though, I'm not, I moved to Los Angeles and I spend more time in cars now than I have in the last 25 years. But the car is the last bastion of listening.
Yeah.
It's the last place you can go to be alone and just listen, you and the music, or you and a friend in the music. And so, I always say, take a drive, or people complain about LA traffic. I'm just like, don't you have some music you want to hear? Just go like, there are at least 10 releases I need to listen to. So yeah, I think Last Man Standing and the new album, I think they're immersive experiences, and like you can pull a song off, sure, and I'm not against people doing that, obviously, but there's a lot of care that goes into track sequence and song selection, and I think maybe not all, but a lot of musicians, that's a really important factor. It's kind of like, I know there's a strict plot line to a lot of films, but there's a lot of possibilities and rearrangements that go into films too. And everyone sits down in the movie theater and watches that sequence of the film. And, if you just pulled out a scene or jumbled it up or watched it on shuffle,
it's not gonna work, right?
No.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And And also a good segue into the four songs in 5 Pounds of Pressure. So tell me kind of about how that came about.
Yeah, I knew the director back in my New York rock and roll days. He was in a band, I was in a band, we were friends, and then we completely lost contact um, for like 20 years or something like that. I mean, I moved to London and, he wasn't someone I was close with. We were just musicians on the scene, but there was definitely an affinity between us. And he he somehow got a copy of the record, and I I heard he really liked it. And one day he showed up on, I think, my Facebook or something, but I got a message saying, "Oh, your album's so great. Me and my wife listen to it all the time." And it was great. We got reacquainted and we went out for a drink. And then he just like would keep writing to me and saying, "Man, your record's so great. I'd really like to put it in a film." And I'm just like, "Yeah, sure. I'd love you to." He wasn't, I knew he was working on getting a film made at that time. I mean, he's always working on getting films made. It's what filmmakers do. And but then I heard that one of his films was getting picked up, and he sent me the screenplay. I didn't think he was thinking of my music for it. He sent me the screenplay and said, "Look, if you want to read it, here it is." I read it and I thought it was really edgy and tough and very New York, very him. He grew up on the streets of Williamsburg before it was a trendy place for rock bands to wear, skinny jeans. And he, I don't know, he one day said, "Hey, I'm thinking of putting a song in your film." I go, "Okay." And the next thing I knew, it was like 4 songs. I was just like, wow. And then I didn't even know about the closing credits until much later on. So that was very nice.
Yeah, that's super cool. What a cool experience. And you never know when, the people will kind of come through and that sort of thing will happen, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So the Great Bewilderment new album just came out, and this album, I mean, it's if it has such a different feel than 12 Little Killers too. I mean, and we talk about Bowie extensively, but I absolutely hear Bowie in this album. And like, I wouldn't be surprised if he was playing on the album or in some capacity. Like it's just it screams Bowie. But tell me about pulling this together because it's a beautiful album too. I mean, like, but tell me about your process with this.
Yeah, I mean, first, I just to comment on the Bowie thing. I can't tell you how hard it is for me to like. I really don't try to go for the Bowie thing. I become aware at some points that, oh, this does have a little bit. I know there's one particularly strong Bowie record, Bowie moment on this record, I think, which is the Here and Now. That kind of stands out as a sort of young Americans kind of soulful moment. Um, I think that's another underrated Bowie record. It's kind of marred by the title track, I think,
Yeah,
that album. But the rest of that album is brilliant and a big influence on me, and I can see how that came about. Um, the record kind of is, I think, a different record from 12 Little Killers in that it feels a bit more expansive, feels a bit more, uh, I guess I want to say like expressive and seeking new territory and trying to forge new ground. And, the pandemic gave us a lot of time.
yeah,
And I think that's reflected in the music. Um, I probably couldn't have made that record outside of the pandemic. We had a lot of time to work on that music. Um, there was a bit of well, who knows what the hell's going to happen anyway. So yeah, why not throw in this, you know, section in 9/8, you know, or why not try to do this thing? Let's not like rush things and make things into tight little songs. I mean, the first half of 12 Little Killers is pretty tight. It's just song after song after song. The second half is a bit more expansive. This record is pretty expansive, I think, at least in feel all the way through. Um, and then thematically, there's a sense of some of these songs were written before. One song was written before the pandemic. No, a few of these songs were written before the pandemic. Now that I think of it, but all the songs, all the lyrics for the songs were kind of written during the pandemic, and so there's also something happening there that can be found in the lyrics as well. And there's a little bit of me being washed up on the shores of New York after my experience in London, you know, that you hear on the 609 and you hear a little bit on the Book of Dread. So there's a little bit of this taking refuge and feeling a bit of an exile, and somewhere between restlessness and being home and things like that. It's looking for a home. Like, I mean, I never really, I'm not sure. I mean, I feel at home in New York City. That is my hometown, but coming back to New York City did not feel like home. I definitely was not that comfortable being back in New York. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. So, you know, so there's a lot of stuff like that that's in the record. I don't know. What are you hearing?
Oh, well, I told you what I hear, but it's also not even just what I hear. It paints a picture, and you paint a picture through the videos. Also, like you mentioned, the 609, like that is such a, so paints such a. It's so visual, right? I mean, what you do with that music video, and you don't see a lot of music videos like that. You know, I mean, you know, so I'm curious also, like how that came about for you. It just
Um,
you paint an image, you know.
yeah, well, you know, the thing I say about the 609 is there are two of them. There's the video and there's the song.
Yeah.
And the song tells one story. It's a completely different story than the amazing story the video tells. I knew from the beginning I wanted a video for that song. And I knew I didn't want the song to be illustrated, even though you could probably do a great illustration of those lyrics. And those lyrics are a lot about my personal feelings toward work and what it does to us, jobs, and working in a factory, whether it's, you know, everything's a factory. Even if you're DIY working, you're your own factory. And this brilliant filmmaker, that's our fifth collaboration. His name's Alden Volney. And he presented this crazy idea, and I really wasn't sure about it at all, quite frankly. But I trusted him because I know how good his work is. I knew visually the work would be good. And he went even further, and the story he's able to overlay on top of my song, they interrelate in an interesting way. There are certain similarities in theme, but he's just gone in a completely different direction and made a brilliant comment about social media and how we pacify ourselves. And yeah, I was pretty happy with that. I haven't seen a video that good in a long time.
Yeah, yeah, you got a lot to be proud of there, and working with the right people
Yeah,
to
well, you
make it
know,
at that vision.
one of my heartaches and, you know, the music industry right now, in my particular lot with the music industry, is like, I really, you know, if nothing else, I would just hope that video would be seen, because that is a really great piece of work by that
Yeah,
incredible filmmaker.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and so, do you plan to take these songs on the road? Do you have a tour? Are you lining up a tour? What does that
Well,
look like for you?
I won't say I have a tour lined up, but I have select cities picked out to do some stuff. So we'll see how it goes. My problem is I've got very busy musicians who are quite in demand, and so the goalpost is constantly moving.
Yeah.
Six goalposts are constantly
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, I can envision like how incredible this album would be to play live, but also it would be an undertaking at the same time, right?
It is. You know, you can't even a very good guitarist or keyboard player or drummer needs to this is the music's fairly arranged. I'm I have a lot of harmonic information in my songs, I am told.
Yeah.
To me, it's just very natural to write this way. It's kind of what turns me on about writing, songwriting. But my chords are not straightforward, and I don't necessarily sit in the same key throughout a song or even throughout a verse. So you know, the things that catch my ear and make me want to keep writing a song when I first am sitting there with my guitar trying to figure out, usually I stumble across something that's not normal. And I'm just like, well, what is this? And that kind of, you know, that works for me. But when it comes time to finding musicians who can learn this stuff, and particularly musicians, because anyone can learn it, but to learn it in a short amount of time where they don't need to invest several days in rehearsal, that's where it gets tricky. And
Yeah.
so, you know, this just happened recently. I had a shoot scheduled, and you know, a very talented keyboard player who's kind of known around here said he'd do it, and then sat down with the music and said, you know, I kind of underestimated how much time this would take. So he wasn't the reason it didn't happen. It didn't happen for other reasons, but like I have to, when I go into these situations, I have to forewarn musicians, you will need to learn these songs. It will take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And do you slow down? Like, are you already kind of thinking a record ahead? Like, or
I'm, yes, I'm already, I kind of am, I'm always writing because I'm always playing guitar. And so when you're learning new stuff on guitar and you're working on your skills, for me anyway, inevitably I will stumble upon something where I'll just be like, oh my God, here we go again. I got to figure this out. I got to see where this goes. And sometimes it doesn't go anywhere, or sometimes it sits with you for a, you know, I sat on those chords to Gaza from the new record.
yeah.
I first played those chords in 2016. And I
Wow.
just was, you know, I just sat on them and played them. And I was like, one day I'm going to have to write a song. And then I think it was during the pandemic, I finished that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I finished it and thought it was done. And then once we started rehearsing it during the pandemic, I realized it had a whole closing section as well, which is that choir part you hear at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That sounds
that was,
powerful. Yeah.
yeah, that's a pretty powerful, crazy 9 minute song.
Yeah. No, you know, to get into a 9 minute song, you have to commit in the first place, but to make it, but also to listen to it, right? So, but
It's a
it's
lot, you know, I
incredible.
was very aware when I first got the test pressings back from the album. I really do have to tell you, I got through side one and I really thought, man, this is, first of all, the reaction was, wow, listening to side A, I feel like I listened to a whole album.
Yeah.
Which I do like records that feel like that. I really do like that when you put on a record and you get through side A and you're like, wow, that was like a whole friggin' bunch of music. And then the other thing I thought was, man, this is a very imposing listening session to ask people. And I really am aware not everyone is up for like listening. You know,
Yeah.
it's a lot of music, it's lyrics, it's guitar solos. I mean, there's it's a big
It's got it
record.
all.
Big record. It feels big to me. I'm kind of not, that kind of goes into the title of the album too. It's a bewildering listen as well.
Yeah. And so as we wind out, tell me, what was your favorite concert? I mean, you've been on all sides of concerts with making them, playing them, seeing them. What was your favorite concert you've been to?
It's kind of impossible to really say. I mean, and concerts operate on all kinds of level. There are concerts where amazing things happen to you because you were with your friends, or because you met someone, or because you fell in love, or because there's concerts that are amazing because what actually happens on stage, and the musicians on stage, and the personality and chemistry in the moment. And because I produced so many concerts, and because I attended so many concerts, um and I was really fortunate. I could pretty much get on the guest list for anything. So it's really hard to just pick out. I mean, I've had favorite concerts by bands that broke up soon after.
Yeah.
So I don't really know. I know there are concerts that I sometimes point to as being the most amazing things I've ever seen. And then I think of, I mean, I just, I mean,
I
I'll
stumped
just,
you.
should I just randomly throw out a bunch and we'll see what kind of list we end up with?
See what lands. Yeah. What's at the top of
I
it?
remember seeing Seyon Kuti, son of Fela Kuti, and Egypt 70. I'd seen him many, many times, but I remember the concert I saw at Primavera Festival in Barcelona, feeling like it was just maybe one of the greatest performances I've ever seen. Um, I produced a concert with the Super Furry Animals on New Year's Eve at the Royal Festival Hall, where we did a takeover of the entire building. And we had installations on every floor that were like party installations. One was an old, crusty old man's pub, as if it were in the countryside. And we, with scenic designers inside the Royal Festival Hall, we built a pub with a dartboard and a couple of old guys we'd have in there drinking, and a bartender who looked like he worked in that kind of pub. And there were people who literally went to the pub that night having bought a ticket for this big show. So Super Furry Animals played 3 sets.
Wow.
Deerhoof played 2 sets. And the whole night was just spectacular. I've seen one of my favorite concerts I've put on was Gang of Four in the Royal
Hmm.
Festival Hall on Massive Attack's Meltdown. They were stunningly good. They blew my mind. I absolutely love them. I'd probably throw on a bunch of John Zorn Naked City gigs or John Zorn Masada gigs on my list. Um, I've seen a number of great Frank Zappa concerts. I don't know where. I did a tour through Europe with Frank Zappa and saw a bunch of great shows then. Um, Sufjan Stevens. Any show I've seen by him has been quite astonishing. I'd probably pick The Age of Ads at the Fox Theater.
Uh-huh.
Um, I've seen a couple of amazing Neil Young shows that would go on my list. Um, I'd like to pick something a little bit more like, I mean, I've seen amazing shows, but Flaming Lips.
Yes.
How
Yes.
many times do you see Flaming Lips and just go, this is the best night of my life? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, there's
Wayne in the Bubble with in Bohemian Rhapsody. I saw. I mean, that was high on my list for me too. Yeah. I mean, that was
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, Flaming Lips always fucking deliver. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. There was a time where they were getting very repetitive, but then they just changed. And like, I mean, I saw them so many times, and they started to change the show a lot time after time, that you felt you could keep going. Oh, P-Funk, Parliament. I mean,
Yeah.
George Clinton,
Yeah. Yeah.
Funkadelic,
George.
one of the
Yeah.
greatest concerts you could ever see ever. If you catch them on the right night at the right time, like I did, I mean, they were absolutely brilliant. I'm forgetting a whole bunch of stuff, but it's like, you know, I sometimes like just because they're so overlooked. I did the reunion of the Beat with Dave Wakeling and Roger, Ranking Roger, and it was the only time after they broke up that the two of them were on stage together. And that concert, even though it's like kind of overlooked, but you know, to the 1,700 people or so that were in that room, that was one of the greatest concerts of all time. We all went crazy.
Yeah.
That shit was just nuts. Yeah, I'm forgetting all sorts of things I've seen at Glastonbury. I went to a lot of festivals, so that's, you know, Radiohead shows. Radiohead at the Roundhouse, boom. I mean, one Radiohead show I saw at the Roundhouse, I was sitting next to Polly Harvey, and they performed just the most incredible concerts. I've seen them a bunch of times. They're always great. So yeah, there are a few.
We got down to the top 50, so
you know what's one of the greatest I have to throw in? One of my earliest concerts was Elton John. It was the first concert I ever saw. It was amazing. I saw Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I saw Yes. I saw Genesis pretty early on when they were still good. You know, those are some of my your early concerts are kind of the most life-changing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's a perfect way to end it. I love it. No, that was good. That was great. So many experiences, and I mean,
I gotta add one more. I did the Brian Wilson Smile concerts.
Yes.
So you know, there's a whole documentary about those concerts, and you know, he almost couldn't do those concerts because it was so emotional. So you know, every night when he got to Surf's Up, for some people it was when he got to the encore and came back out, but for me, it was every night when he performed the song Surf's Up, which is not a surf song for those who don't know. It's almost an orchestral piece of Gershwin-esque music. Every night, that just broke me down. I just, you know, and not just me, you know, people, not a dry eye in the house. That was really top concert moment was Brian Wilson, because, you know, his rehabilitation was very evident on stage, and everyone in the room was participating in this kind of lifting up of the man. Stevie Wonder, Radio City Music Hall. Oh my God, one of the greatest concerts you could ever see. Stevie Wonder at Masonic in Detroit. Oh my God, he skipped Detroit on his previous tour, and he got such backlash from it. He went to Detroit for 6 nights. Marvin Gaye was killed the week before.
Oh my gosh.
He shows up in Detroit for 6 nights.
Incredible.
Unbelievable.
Wow. That's so amazing.
There are some.
You got a couple out there. Yeah.
You know, I could go on.
I know. I better stop.
Yeah.
No, it's great.
Cool.
Vanderwolf, I want to thank you for taking the time, and congratulations on the new album. It is beautiful. I really dig it, and I hope to see you out here on the West Coast. Also,
play it for your friends. Trap them in your car. Take a long.
I'll trap them. Yes, for sure. I will definitely be sharing it. So,
all right.
That was my interview with Vanderwolf here at Custer Pipeline, and that takes us to the final segment of the program, the music news. I have a couple of stories to wind out the program today. The first has to do with No Doubt. Yes, Gwen Stefani and the gang are getting back together for a reunion at Coachella in April. They started rehearsing for their forthcoming reunion show and let fans in on a sneak preview of how their set is taking shape. This was announced just in January that they were going to play their first show together since 2015. Gwen Stefani shared a video to her Instagram account of the band performing, which started with her dancing before she took the camera and came up to each of the other members in turn as they were playing. They gave each other hugs, and this other video was shared to Twitter of the band greeting each other at rehearsal. Look at us, we're doing it, Stefani said. I didn't know that many memory floods would come in strolling through those gates. Very weird. There's lots of memories. And She said the genesis of the reunion just happened so fast, and that's my favorite kind of thing to happen. And I think really just watching the internet blow up with how excited the fans are, that's inspiring us. Yeah, I mean, she had a great band with No Doubt, and then she went on to do her own pop thing and exploded. And of course, hosting The Voice and being and marrying Blake Shelton and all these things really made her star rise. But I don't think she was ever better than when she was with No Doubt. I was a fan of No Doubt back in the day. And as I watched these videos, it gave me that nostalgia piece. I'm big on some nostalgia things, and I just it made me want to be there. I was like, can I go to Coachella and see No Doubt? Is that a thing that I can do? I had to shake it off because I'm like, no, I can't. I gotta stop. I've been buying too many concert tickets recently. There's so many shows that it's just like, nope, I gotta be at that. I have to be at that. There's no question about it. And I was like, I can't take a trip to Coachella. There's just no way I can justify that. But I can watch videos online. So I will do that. I will watch videos of No Doubt's reunion. I'll look it up and watch them and wish I was there. But I have so many other kind of nostalgia acts that I'm going to see in the coming months, and so many concert tickets I've been buying. I mean, I got Foo Fighters coming up later in the year. I just bought tickets to Ben Queller. He's going to be here in the area, Healdsburg. He's playing a show. I mean, that's a fun show because I've interviewed so many people everyone that's playing him, his guitarist, Christmas Ploss, who was McLovin in Superbad. I mean, that's his bassist. His drummer also was in the band with Christmas Mintz-Plasse. Also, he has another guitarist, Robert Ellis, who's playing with him. He's also opening the show, and I interviewed him last year. So it's this show that I'm like, I really want to go to it. I'm going to go to it. So I'm going to do that. Probably some other shows. I tried to get tickets for Green Day that are playing the Fillmore this Tuesday. There's no way that I even had a chance to get tickets for that show, but they announced the show this past week, and then tickets went on sale and sold out, obviously, in under 5 minutes. But Live Nation screwed me over with tickets, not even just the fact that I wasn't going to get them, but they didn't even put me into the queue for the tickets. They just was like, okay, wait here. It's okay. We'll come back to you when the tickets go on sale. And it never did. So I opened a new window, got to the back of line where there was 9,000 people in line ahead of me, because it shows you how many people were ahead of you in the queue. And I was like, well, that's a wrap. So yeah, that was pretty lame. All right. Next story is the one that shook the world, Beyonce's country album that she put out, Cowboy Carter. Haven't listened to any of it other than like the first single she put out a couple weeks ago. But I've been just seeing story after story about it. I think there's like 20 songs on the album. She rewrote Dolly Parton's Jolene lyrics to reference Jay-Z cheating scandal on Cowboy Carter. The lyric, Jolene, 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 I'm warning you, don't come for my man. It obviously speaks to Jay-Z's cheating. But it doesn't really, those lyrics don't really kind of put any of the onus on her man doing the cheating. But I think it's playful in the looking at the other side of things, that there's other people involved as well. Okay. Also, Nancy Sinatra shared her thoughts on Beyonce's Cowboy Carter track "Ya Ya," kicking off with a sample of her own work, the 1966 hit "These Boots Are Made for Walkin'." And Sinatra said, "To have a little piece of one of my records in a Beyonce song is very meaningful to me because I love her. She represents what is great about today's music, and I'm delighted to be a tiny part of it." She added, "This may be the best sample of Boots yet." And the beat goes on. Hashtag Beyonce. Okay. And then there was one other one that I saw. Beyonce's cover of the Beatles' Blackbird is a timely masterstroke. Penned by Paul McCartney as a tribute to the civil rights movement and featuring Black female country artists, it makes perfect sense for the superstar to feature it on Cowboy Carter. That she went for that. I haven't listened to it again, but apparently she went for that, and that's nice. That's nice that she did that. So with all the tributes that she paid in there, and it wasn't just a country album. I'm becoming a little bit more forgiving of Beyonce for diving into the country world and trying, her hand at that music. I have no allegiance to country music. I'm not even a fan of country music, so I just gotta let it lie. Okay, Jerry Seinfeld honored Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden anniversary show in New York. For those that aren't aware, Billy Joel just played his 100th show at Madison Square Garden in New York, of which he's retired. And each of the 100 shows were a sellout, which is incredible. He played his first show at Madison Square Garden on December 14th, 1978. And every concert of theirs has been a sellout ever since. Seinfeld spoke to the crowd and paid tribute to him, saying, "I am from Long Island, like Billy is from Long Island." He captured how well we all feel living in this particular part of the world, Long Island, New York. He's like the companion that we've gone through our whole lives with. His music is our best friend for our whole life. He said 100 sellouts in a row. Congratulations, Billy. And he presented a banner to commemorate the milestone. Most lifetime performances by any artist. You can die now, he joked. He said, and Joel told Seinfeld, "And I want to thank you for buying my house." As well to say, that was a nice thing to do. Seinfeld currently lives in his former house, having purchased Joel's house almost 25 years ago. So they have a close connection, apparently, and that was a touching tribute. So very cool. Big on Billy Joel. That is quite a milestone, and he just put out his first new single in 17 years also. So apparently he's now just starting to make music since he's hit that 100 milestone. He can now start making new music again. All right, Limp Bizkit and lead singer Fred Durst and Billy Corgan have new shows that are going to be dropping on Bill Maher's podcast network. I wasn't aware that Bill Maher had a podcast network, but apparently those two are going to have shows. And the two shows will operate under Mayor's Club Random flagship podcast, where they will host their own respective shows. Durst will reportedly center his show around UFOs and conspiracy theories. Apparently, he's an expert there. No information has been given on the content around Corgan's podcast, but you can check that out if you're at all interested. That's where to find it, because apparently you won't find it on a normal podcast app. So, all right, one final story to wrap out the music news. St. Vincent reacted to Dave Grohl recording drums for Flea. They said, "Fuck yeah!" They're so stoked to have Dave Grohl playing on their new song Flea. Musicians shared the track on March 28th, and it was the second track lifted from her forthcoming album All Born Screaming, featuring Dave Grohl. He also appears on the track Broken Man, and she shared footage of Grohl performing the drums on the song while she air drums in another room. After he's finished recording, she runs into the room excitedly shouting, "Fucking fuck yeah, fuck yeah," to which Grohl claps his hands and laughs, and you can view that video online. And they're just so excited to have Dave Grohl. What a cool thing. And Dave Grohl just continuing to share his skills with those around him, not just limiting to his own bands, but he's performed on so many other projects and just lives life. And this is why we try to talk about Dave Grohl in every episode of Concert Pipeline, if we can. So hats off to Dave Grohl. Okay, that's our show for today. Thanks for tuning in. Next time on the program, we will have Chris James from the Burrito Brothers on the program. I had a chance to interview him. I think it's my second time interviewing him, and that's what's coming up. So for all of us here at Concert Pipeline, I'm Steve Jones. We'll catch you next time.